Are you looking for help with the Praxis Elementary Education Social Studies Subtest 5004? United States History, Government, and Citizenship, U.S. History. Hi, I am Sandra Matthews, and I have a doctoral degree in education and a minor in history, and I would love to share that information with you here at study.com to get you ready for that Praxis exam. Why don't we go ahead and start analyzing each of those questions? France controlled the area of New Orleans until the Louisiana Purchase. What is one reason the French agreed to sell the land? So you're going to need to know your history here. A, Napoleon needed money, and the French no longer needed the port in New Orleans because they had lost their sugar plantations in Haiti. And that is true. There were a lot of rebellions going on. They lost those plantations in Haiti, and Napoleon definitely needed money because he was very concerned about what was going on in Europe and any battles that he would need to fund. B, the French sold the land as a gesture of good faith. Well, there was no good faith, and again, Napoleon needed money. C, Napoleon was determined to expand into North America, but he needed funds to complete his goals. So he sold the land to get those funds to extend into North America. That doesn't even make sense. None of that makes sense for letter C. And then D, the French sold the land to gain funds to extend their empire into other parts of North America and to reinforce their claims in the Caribbean. Well, again, there was a lot of rebellion going on in the Caribbean. The French did sell their land to get money, but they were not interested into pushing into North America. They wanted to make sure they were prepared for fighting against Britain if that came to it, and it certainly looked like that was happening. So the correct answer is A, Napoleon needed money, and the French no longer needed the port in New Orleans because they had lost their sugar plantations in Haiti. How did Andrew Jackson respond to the verdict of the Cherokee Nation versus Georgia and Worcester versus Georgia's court case? A, he ignored the ruling that states did not have the power to force Native Americans from their land and continued with forced removal. And that is true. He completely ignored the Supreme Court's ruling, and he continued to push into Native American land and claim it. B, he claimed the court had acted without due process and demanded they reconsider the verdict. He didn't care. He ignored it, pushed forward, and continued to move into Native American territory. C, he had the case overturned and brought a new suit against the Native Americans claiming they violated the treaties. Nope, he didn't have anything overturned. He just ignored it and continued to push forward. Or D, he followed the dictate of the court and ended forced removal. Not true at all. He ignored what was going on. So the correct answer is A. He ignored the ruling that states did not have the power to force Native Americans from their land and continued with forced removal. Which of the following illustrated what the main catalyst was that triggered the American Revolution? And a really important key here is what's the main catalyst? A, the signing of the Declaration of Independence. Well, that was the actually signing of the independence. It's certainly not what triggered the revolution. Or B, the signing of the Treaty of Paris, and that was after the war was over. The Battle of Yorktown, a super important battle, but it was not what triggered the revolution, but instead D, the Boston Tea Party is what triggered the American Revolution because it was taxation without representation and the rebellion that was the catalyst that began. So the correct answer is D, the Boston Tea Party. In colonial America, slaves were not permitted to enter contracts, learn how to read, get married, or gather outside the presence of white individuals, in addition to other restrictions. These restrictions were enforced by the colonies through the adoption of A, the Transatlantic Slave Agreement. There was a transatlantic slave, contracts happening and so forth, but there was no real agreement. There's no such documentation. There was a slavery agreement. There was certainly a process going on, but it was not any formal agreement. B, slave codes. There were slave codes, and those slave codes made sure that people that were slaves were unable to read, get married, and they were not allowed to gather unless whites were in presence. Or C, the Treaty of Paris, again, that is ending the war, and it is not to deal with the slave codes. And though the Missouri Compact for letter D is really important because it allowed one free state, one slave state, it's not really in the same time period that we are talking about the slave codes. So the correct answer is B, slave codes. For more practice materials, check out our Praxis Elementary Education Social Studies Subtest 5004 playlist. And those who study at study.com have a 92% pass rate. We have courses that help you through all kinds of materials that have been researched and have been tested, and they're all there just waiting for you. So please subscribe, please like this video. Thanks for watching, and happy studying.